So you're talking about the evolution of identity and its importance for our digital life.
Indeed. Thank you so
Your
much.
turn.
So, my topic tonight, my actual topic may be a surprise because you can't tell from the title. I'm actually going to be I'm going to be giving you a journey through digital identity, sort of a past and future history of digital identity, and I'll give you that journey by car. There will be no blockchain in my talk, so that'll be perhaps a respite from the earlier section, but I was glad to see that Jackson was talking about IoT as he does, so we'll have a little bit of a keynote module here. So I want to talk for a moment about what customers want. What do customers want? Anybody here watch Eurovision a couple nights ago? Anybody a fan? All right, there's one person. You should check out the winner. She was awesome. She had this song, "I'm Not Your Toy." And customers, they do not want to be your toy. They want what they want. They want transcendent experiences. They actually want privacy in the manner of choice and control. They want trust. And I will bring some proof points to bear to convince you of this. So how do you know if you're trusted as a business? Well, they'll tell you. So the Mobile Ecosystem Forum did a wonderful survey about consumer trust. And it turns out that over half of consumers consider bad user experience, to be an important contributing factor to having trust concerns. And 88% of consumers will take action in ways that will really disturb you when they have trust concerns. So for example, they will warn family and friends, and they will warn their social media contacts. They will switch to other services. They will leave bad reviews. We all know the stories about that. Maybe some of us have done that. And they will delete applications. So now in the world of automotive, we know that car manufacturers are racing to keep up. So what does that mean? It's a challenging and exciting time for cars and other vehicles when you mix them with data integration. And the world of identity has actually been doing a lot to, it's got a lot going on. But I submit to you that identity, and in particular consent, the consent part of privacy, has a lot to do to become more sophisticated still in order to do a really good job. So borrowing from a nearby attraction and choosing a lens of digital identity, what I'd like to do is actually propose to you that there's really 3 eras of interest when we look at automotive plus data together. So the first era is the offline era. Anybody remember those days? Anybody know when Easy Rider actually came out?
Late 60s.
69. Of course, this was a very, very long era composed of decades. But I'm going to define this era as being when cars didn't even have smartphone jacks. Okay? So we were digital at home for part of this period, but we'd climb into our cars that were fully analog. Now, that means that we were buying cars as basically singular packaged goods, like we bought so many other things, including, by the way, GPS devices for the latter part of that era. You could just walk in and anonymously plunk down, cash and buy a GPS device if you used it. But even prior to that, you'd use a map, or you'd go to MapQuest or something and print directions and then pull that into your car and use it. So the use cases you had were wander around in your vehicle and have a good time, or you could go from point A to point B using your very analog experience. Now, what did identity do during this era? Well, frankly, it was of low maturity. We didn't even really call it identity for a really long time. As Kim pointed out, internet was born without an identity layer. Okay, I was there for the birth of SAML. Did you ever really notice the name SAML doesn't have an I in it? It's about security and directory, at least it was when it was born. So we had login accounts. It took a little while for us to understand what our business was here. So that was era number 1. Era number 2. Is there anybody here who doesn't actually have a connected car for their daily driver? Okay, good for you, all right. So you're one of those who would be driven around in an autonomous car when they pry your steering wheel from your cold, dead hands, I'm guessing. Awesome. So this era is defined by 4 things: the appearance of connectivity, services, sharing, and autonomy. So get a load of this quote from KPMG. 85% of auto execs agree that the digital ecosystem will generate higher revenues than the hardware of the car itself. So we're talking about subscriptions, right? I mean, I bought a car in 2016 and it came with a SIM card. So yeah, I've got one of those. So yes, we call this connected car, but there's actually a bundle of new names that this sector is going by now. New mobility, smart mobility, urban mobility, or just automobility, all one word. So what we're talking about here is its integration of maps, for one, music, parking with garages, all these things that we sort of, saw imagined by manufacturers a decade plus ago is really happening. So what's essential to do this? APIs, it took the API economy to do this. Identity, what fuels all those subscriptions, Internet of Things, and frankly, customer or consumer identity is really a part of this. So the maturing of the identity world partly led to the possibilities here. Now I want to deep dive for a second into the experiences that I was talking about, Transcendent Experiences. So I recently saw a talk by this fellow. He's got this book coming out, The Blue Dot Consumer. What does he mean by the blue dot? Well, in the offline world, if you were navigating by map, you traced maybe with a finger or pencil on a map. Or if you used printed directions, you'd go, sort of turn by turn down the paper. Well, now the way we navigate is, the blue dot is where we are. We are the center of the universe. Literally, he's talking about the experiences that we all demand. This is us he's talking about. We feel it, right? We demand that kind of service. And so what this means is we demand the most amazing experiences in a context of GDPR, I'm going to say it. He described this one experience, I don't know where it was maybe somewhere in Europe, where you could, must have been somewhere in the UK, because I think it was for £5, you could get, it was a simple grilled cheese sandwich, and if you stood on an X marks the spot somewhere, they would text the place to you. You would get your customized grilled cheese sandwich, and they would put a little parachute on the sandwich, and it would waft down to you. So it was the perfect combination of digital to physical. Okay, this is the world we live in now. I was like, okay, really? But these are the awesome experiences that this fellow talks about. So in this context, we have to figure out how to do this in the automotive world. Well, it's different from just using an app, because your phone is a very one-to-one experience. It's intimate and personal to you. It's not precisely single user, but it acts that way. But cars, not so much. One owner, perhaps, many drivers, especially with car sharing. So you have to figure out how to have whatever the personalized experience is follow you. So kind of like cloud sync, like iCloud or something, but physical. So that's an implication of what identity means when mapped to this connected era. But then, what about privacy? So, can't go in back seat, can it? So I found this really interesting study by an organization called FIA Region 1. So the name of it is in French, I won't attempt it, but it's basically the International Association of Automobiles for the EMEA region. And so they have an effort called My Car, My Data to promote the knowledge that pretty much almost every piece of data associated with a connected car is personal. They did a legal study and found out that indeed that's true. So oil gauge says your oil is low. It's considered personal data because the car is registered to you. What about that, huh? So whether you really like driving or whether you like being driven around in an autonomous car or whether you like a chauffeur, I think Ralph was talking earlier about 100 years ago there was a shortage of chauffeurs and we'd all be in trouble. Customers want data control put in their hands. So this was a study by the Economist Intelligence Unit that ForgeRock actually commissioned. There's fascinating stuff, more fascinating stuff in there. You can go to our website to find it. So what's the next era? What's the third era going to be? The seamless era. We're almost there. I can just taste it. So this is a lifestyle. And the funny thing is, it's starting to mean that automotive becomes not so much a vertical sector as horizontal across sectors. It's going to require, we can see where it's going, integration across payments, retail, health, government, insurance. We were learning about insurance earlier today. So, you know, when I was talking about APIs and IoT and talking about identity, that's just the tip of it. So here's just a glimmer of some of the disruption and some of the opportunity that is possible. You allow access to your trunk to the dry cleaning people for pickup or drop off of a suit. Confident in the knowledge that your car is not going to be stolen. Or you earn quite a lot of money on the side from sharing of your car through your Airbnb rental as part of the package, confident in the knowledge that your glove box won't be gotten into. Or payment for tolls and goods can come out of the right account because it goes by driver, not by owner. Or your car negotiates with all of the smart city interfaces regarding road use and parking dwell time, and the purpose might be for safety metrics, or it might be for health of the particular driver, but the data might be de-identified appropriately. So all these things could be possible. But wait, how? How can this all be done? Sounds an awful lot like, I don't know, Star Trek or something, where suddenly they are interfacing with the ship of a previously unknown alien species. Like, really? So among all the challenges, and there's a lot of challenges, like, for example, urban mobility, I mentioned as one of the names. Well, urban mobility is not yet rural mobility, frankly. So that's one. But there's two challenges here that we can take action on now, that they are eminently solvable. The first one is we actually need to start managing identity relationships properly. This is not your grandfather's identity and access management anymore. The more identities you need to manage, the more significant the relationships among them become. And so this is nodes and arcs we're talking about here. And so we're talking about a lot of nodes and a lot of node types. So let me give you some examples here. Well, you got people. And these people include owners, maintainers, drivers, renters, and by the way, the subscriptions that they have, the entitlements they have, the consents they have. We're also talking about actual cars or other vehicles. And these are ecosystems, of course. They have lots of parts. We're talking about cloud services, not just one service, multiple services. We're talking about sensors, so that's what makes up an ecosystem of a car, and those have identities and versions for each of those pieces. We're talking about software, those have identities and versions. And we're talking about infrastructure, and all of these things connect. And so infrastructure, to give you some idea of what those might be: traffic lights, garages, signal towers, billboards. That makes me think Minority Report. Okay. What's the second challenge we need to take up? We need to really refactor consent for the seamless era. This is really, really important. Okay, look at these use cases. They involve vehicle-to-vehicle communications. They involve vehicle-to-infrastructure communications. They involve vehicle-to-cloud communications about some user in real time, often regarding physical safety and security. So you can't go wrong with that. But what about GDPR requirements, I hear you say, because it's come up in the last few talks and people are starting to anticipate, and that's near and dear to my heart, and it isn't just about lawyers. It's also about trust. And what about user control? What about people's expressed desire to have control? Well, here's where I say you got to do a few things. You need to empower people to express their wishes asynchronously to when the communications have to happen. And you need to enable those wishes, let's call them policies, to be handled by a specialty engine that knows how to scale. And this actually allows for automation that is so, so important in this environment. So I'm going to say this is not implied consent. This is actually abstracted consent, and by the way, a much better experience than pressing like a rat at a feeder bar, yes, I agree all the time. So what I'm describing here is actually a perfect fit for, you may not be surprised if it's me here talking, the architecture of user-managed access, which has a killer combination with identity relationship management and the way that, for example, graph databases work. And most excitingly, this can enable a big data and AI approach. There, I said it too. That's 3 in a row. I don't know if our arrangers here at the event knew this was coming. A big data and AI approach so that you can start to have consent intelligence work on behalf of the actual individual. That is to say, you start to have big enough data sets that you can take consent actions with the prearranged okay on the individual's behalf. So I have very little time left, and I'm just going to wrap up here, but I hope I've given you some new thoughts towards this exciting area and how identity is so critical to it. And I will let Martin take over. Thank you.
So thank you, Eve, for your talk. Being from Stuttgart, automotive is always interesting to me.
I thought it might be.
So thank you for that. So when I looked, we didn't have questions. So oh, there's one. Do you see that the whole world are connected in the future, IoT and people? So will this really happen?
So I found some statistics talking about, it's kind of a sliding scale where these eras really start and end, okay? Because, for example, in the US, I found some evidence that there's 200 million cars with an average age of 11 years of age. So, you've got some cars that are going to remain non-connected for a long time there. Yeah. Now, I'm speaking as somebody whose husband has a car hand-built in Neckarsulm. So not very long ago.
and maybe if you don't want to get connected, at the end of the day you have to buy an old Porsche or Rolls because they have the longest lifetime of all the vehicles.
Yeah. So I mean, I think in a long enough lifespan, yes, connected becomes the default. I found other evidence that within just a few years, 75% of all new cars will be connected. So again, sliding scale of these eras, but cool. In a long enough time frame, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Eve.
My pleasure.